raising women's voices,
one story at a time.
Welcome to the She Said Project podcast. Okay, I think we've heard that refrain like 3,000 times by now, and it still gets me excited, Carrie, to hear the music that we're starting a new episode of the She Said Project podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Jeanette Jerzik, one of your hosts, National Director of the She Said Project.
This is so exciting to be here. I'm Carrie Rosso, co-founder, co-sidekick.
Co-sidekick.
I
like that.
Yeah. Sidekicks.
What goes through your mind when you hear the music start?
Actually, I still get butterflies because the opening of that is us walking on stage, and some of my show favorite memories are those moments before we go out on stage. We're all sneaking peeks to see if we can see our people in the audience. We're all getting fired up. The very first show, Jill and I were hitting each other on the backside and high-fiving and getting pumped up. It was like we were in the tunnel before coming out of the Super Bowl.
So, Carrie, I don't think you've ever learned that when you are standing backstage in the wings and you peek your head up, everyone can see you. Like, when you are checking out who's in the audience, everyone can see you.
No,
you are not hiding.
They totally can't.
You are not hiding from anybody.
Yeah, I'm very suave and debonair. But I do think like people who, just like the first time we gave you a fanny slap and you were sort of shocked, the other founders and I, we all had played sports. So that was sort of just this built in. And then when the theater kids joined the party and we started.
Yeah, butt slaps are not a thing in the world of theater. Yeah. And then I met you guys. Now, as you know, my daughter now plays volleyball and now I get it. Okay, I think I've sent you so many photos via text in the last 2 years of, oh my God, I'm watching sports. Yay, aren't you proud of me?
Yay, it's all of our worlds are colliding. Well, and I am becoming a little more theatery, like snaps and all the things.
Break a leg and Bravo and all of the theater slang.
Yep.
I'm so proud of you.
I think we wrote a line in once, but will it play in Peoria? And I'd never heard it. And I kept saying, but will it play in Peoria? Will it? And you were like, no, sis, you're missing it. So I had to do some theater
You were
research.
like, why would I say that? I'm like, trust me, it's a thing.
Right, like why wouldn't I say Springfield? Why wouldn't I?
Because Peoria is a thing. And it did. It's played in Peoria. It's played all across East Central Illinois and beyond. We're in 5 or 6 states now, 15 shows. Of course, we're talking about That's What She Said, the live show that is produced by the She Said Project and all of our amazing regional partners in different communities. And women from each community are invited on the stage to share a personal story in a very heartfelt, vulnerable performance. And here on the She Said Project podcast, if you have not joined us before, we spend a little bit of time visiting with one of these incredible women, talking about the story that she shared. So our guest today is one of our speakers from the Bloomington Normal community, and she shared a story on stage not too long ago, but it was about, she shared a story on the 2024 stage of That's What She Said, Bloomington Normal. And so I think we should just jump right in because I can see her like, we're talking theater and theater's her thing, and she wants to jump into the conversation, and we're like, holding her back, but no more. Let's bring her out here. Jennifer Keith, you are on the lines.
Crowd goes wild.
Welcome to the She Said Project podcast, my dear, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ladies. Glad to be here.
It's so good to see you. This woman brings me so much joy, Carrie. So here's the thing. I have been daydreaming, fantasizing about this moment in time for a very long time, years. Carrie Rosso, you come from a background of education. You work in the schools with kids. Jennifer, you are an educator. You are two of the funniest women I have ever met in my life. And I have been dreaming about the day your worlds would collide and I would get to sit back and watch. So go.
That's awesome.
No pressure. Be funny.
No pressure. Be funny. Well, I mean, who knew that I was in your fantasies? This is
That's true.
Thanks. This is a first.
I kind of suspected. Yeah.
Well, I fantasize about, theater and stardom, and my friend Jennifer here, she and I share some of those same fantasies.
Absolutely. In fact, I just got back from 22 students and I traveling to London, England for 10 days.
Oh
and
my
we saw
goodness.
5 West End shows. In
What was
10
your
days.
favorite?
I wanted to see, we planned a couple that I'd already seen. So that was, Hadestown was not my favorite in the States, but the way that they staged it on the West End, I fell in love with it a whole different way. So
Really?
I enjoyed Wicked because there's such a buzz around the show of Wicked right now because of the movies. And so it was really nice to see those cast members. I mean, it was neat to see my students that had not watched anything but the movie get a chance to like, oh, there's more.
Oh, this is where it comes
Act
from.
One.
Yes.
Oh, there's more. Yeah, don't leave. There's a whole other act.
Well,
And
they'll
that'll be
find out when the
second
movie comes out. It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah, so then they had surprises in the second act, but just the standing ovation. We saw The Play That Goes Wrong, which is, to me, a director's nightmare. And so the first time I saw that, I hated it because I was
just saw it in New York last weekend.
I couldn't breathe because it was so horrible. I mean, it was beautifully acted. It was beautifully teched, but I just was so panicked the whole time
Yes,
about
yes.
how would you direct this. And now I'm like, oh, I would want to direct this. This would be kind of fun. But we saw Mamma Mia and we saw The Great Gatsby. The Great Gatsby.
Well, that is
beautifully
a
done.
theater lover's dream trip right there.
Yes.
With how many students?
I had 12 students and 10 adults that went total, but we also met up with 10 from Texas. So there were 33 of us, all roaming around London for 10 days, and it was phenomenal just to get to see. And they're theater kids, whether they were before the trip or not. They are now. We did some workshops, but we saw all of the sites. We saw, and I just loved watching these young people who had, some of them never been on a plane before, some of them not been in a big city before. Some had, but just still watching them like puff their chests out a little bit and be like, oh, I could do this. I could live here. I could do this. And it was just so neat to watch them all, grow a little bit. And in a week, I was so excited to bring them back and just make sure they all came back, but then bring them back so that their parents could see how they had changed in just a week. And it was just really rewarding in so many different ways than you get to be in a daily classroom, because these kids chose this versus the kids that were, my captive audience during Shakespeare class that maybe didn't choose that. These kids got to visit the Globe Theatre in London
Yes.
and Shakespeare's birthplace and were really excited about it versus the ones who are like, what is this guy about?
Travel
So-
and experiences like that. I mean,
Yeah.
that really helps kids grow up really fast.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it changes them. So their parents, I'm sure, were grateful to get a break. You took their kids for a week or so.
Yes.
So, Carrie,
They're great.
and our friends know a little bit of my story that I lived in New York. I lived in LA, and I came back to Illinois. But I always dreamed about, getting into theater, and I got that chance. I worked as a performer in New York and Los Angeles before coming back to Champaign. And so when I met Jennifer and heard her story, there's a lot of similarities, but she started here in the Midwest and had her sights set on the Big Apple. And she did get to live out her dream. And I remember when we talked about this, Jennifer, you almost didn't, because a lot of things happened right before you moved to New York. There were like a lot of signs that maybe you shouldn't go. And what I love so much about you is you made a big decision to go, no, that's exactly why I should go. Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I had taught in a small rural high school in Northern Illinois for the first 5 years of my teaching career and thought, that's it. I have been telling high school kids for years to follow their dreams, and I don't think this little town in Northern Illinois was on my list of dreams. It was lovely, and I could not have had a better, more comforting, more welcoming school district. But that wasn't what I really wanted to do. I wanted to direct film, theater, commercials, whatever in New York City. And Northern Illinois is far removed from New York City. And I would encourage my students, go audition. I would take them to auditions where they could go to New York, to schools and things. And I was sitting in Northern Illinois. So I finally just said, I'm going to go. And I told my family, I'm going to go to New York City. I don't know how I'm going to get there. I don't know what I'm going to do. But I'm going to get there because it's not happening here. And the internet was just a baby at that point, 2001. And so I'm going to figure this out. And I visited a foreign exchange student who had come from Italy and had fell in love with my theater program in this little town. And so I was visiting her in Venice, and I got a phone call that my sister had been injured in a car accident. And so I flew home immediately, and we were vigil by my sister's side for 30 days in the intensive care unit in St. Louis. And I would drive back and forth to my job and still finish the school year. And I went to her, she had just become a teacher. And I went and visited her kids and tried to reassure them, but apparently we looked way too much alike, so I totally freaked them out, which I feel horrible about, but we laugh about now. But, and after the 30 days, she didn't survive. And so we were heartbroken, and my mother's like, well, don't go to New York. And I said, I have to go. Life is shorter than I ever thought, and I don't know where I'm going to be, but if I don't go now, I'm not going to go. And I really have to see if this is it. I'm either going to make it or make peace with it. And so I did. I reached out to other people. How do I get there? And I had a friend who I'd met in college who had older daughters who had become nannies. And she's like, go on nanny.com, which this is the beginning of the internet. So I was like, kind of not sure what that is. But I did, and I met two wonderful families from the exact same town that both were willing to bring me to this little town in New York State, right outside of Long Island, and, you know, to test me out, to see if that, and I flew out there and loved the family, and okay, now I've got a place to live, I've got a job, then we'll just see where it goes from there. But, you know, all of those had to fall into, and I remember people asking me at my sister's funeral, well, you can't possibly. And I'm like, if I don't go now, I'll never go. And then 3 weeks after I moved, it was 9/11.
So obviously there were so many more circumstances
Yeah.
around this huge decision in your life, which you shared quite a bit in your story, Taking a Bite of the Apple. So I think we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to see Jennifer's performance from That's What She Said. We'll be right back. So enjoy this performance by Jennifer Keith, her story, Taking a Bite of the Apple from That's What She Said 2024 Bloomington Normal.
My dream was to live in the Ed Sullivan Theater in New York City. The bright lights and the bridges that surrounded David Letterman as he gave a monologue, interviewed a guest, or counted down a top 10 list were inviting, exciting, living, and breathing. So after my first 5 years of teaching, where I encouraged high school students to chase their dreams, I found the courage to prepare my resignation with a plan to move to New York City. Not in the Ed Sullivan Theater, the security guards frown upon that, but to be in Times Square, to pursue what I'd always wanted to do, become the first female talk show host in late night. I love the idea of giving a monologue, of using humor to entertain, to inform with some jokes, to interview a really interesting guest, share the stage with music and amazing people. And I gave my typed letter of resignation to my principal, who was surprised and said he'd hold on to it for a little while in case I changed my mind. I was determined. I would not be changing my mind even if my world changed drastically within the next week. My 23-year-old sister Christy was severely injured in a head-on rollover car accident. And for the next 30 days and nights, we sat vigil at a St. Louis intensive care unit until the doctors told us she would not be waking up again. At her standing room only funeral, my principal reminded me he had not turned in my resignation yet. And I said, please do. I have to go now more than ever. And if I don't go now, I never will. So he did, and so did I. I moved to New York City. just a few months after my sister's death. And I moved in with a family on Long Island and became the nanny for their twin 6th graders. Because of their schedule and school, I knew I could further my education at the same time, so I signed up for photography classes at Long Island University and the International Center of Photography in Times Square. To become a student, I just had to go to a brief interview with my portfolio. I didn't have one of those, so for the next several weeks, I took pictures of everything. And on August 31st, I went to the top of the Empire State Building and took pictures of the entire tri-state area and all of its impressive architecture. I made a plan later on to take pictures of the Empire State Building, and that would be a Tuesday morning after Labor Day, the 11th of September. After a longer or later than normal Monday night, I woke up groggy and rushed as I prepared the twins for their early morning field trip with homemade lunches and early drop-off, which I thought was great because then I could get to the station early and beat all of the tourists to the top of the World Observation Deck, the World Trade Center. Dropped them off, got to the station, walked onto the train, and looked down and realized I didn't have my camera. Walked back off, the doors closed, the train went on, and I was angry. I went back to my car, went back to the house, and I had just destroyed myself over those 30 minutes that I just now added to my commute. When I walked in the house, the phone was ringing. It was my mother from Central Illinois. Come home. Why? Come home now. Your city's on fire. And that was when I saw the second plane hit the second tower, my tower. I was instantly overcome with a sense of dread and relief at the same time. And that feeling wouldn't leave me for at least a year as I watched this city, the center of an international terrorist attack, mourn and triumph in equal parts. The lights at David Letterman's theater were dim for the next week, while tourism waned and rescue operations became recovery ones. And it was 3 weeks before Saturday Night Live returned to the airwaves. But with it, a collective sigh of relief of New Yorkers as we could now laugh again in spite of indescribable trauma. Some would argue that it was too soon, but I tend to think that humor and trauma go hand in hand most times. Carol Burnett gave credit to her grandmother, and although the origin isn't officially known for this equation, tragedy plus time equals comedy. Time is relative, and humor is subjective. But humor has power, which is really why I wanted to be on that center stage. Power to lead, the power to entertain, the power to educate, power to share joy, and the power to heal. Rosie O'Donnell was one of the first female talk show hosts, and while she didn't host during late night, she did everything I wanted to do: educate, entertain, give stuff away. And I desperately wanted to be in her audience in New York City, and after 9/11, the New York City Tourism Bureau begged locals to save the entertainment industry. Please come and see shows. Please come and see the talk shows. Please support the movies. And they didn't have to ask me twice. Within a month, there I was in the front row, in front of Rosie O'Donnell, center stage, in the iconic Rockefeller Center. She was electric, entertaining, everything I knew I would be. And I loved it, even if she stole my job. During the first commercial break, however, when the live lights turned off, so did her contagious smile. I saw the heartbreak of performing comedy in a city just 1 month removed from destruction of life, buildings, and security. I saw the human behind the humor and the energy it took to be on, hiding whatever her true emotions were for the sake of others. And I saw myself. And I realized that as an educator, whether in front of a class or just living my life, that I was on center stage, performing, entertaining, hiding all the time that I was sad and heartbroken for loss of my sister, my city, my dream. When I returned back to Central Illinois that next August, I wasn't sure I wanted to teach ever again, so I took other jobs. The school found out. And they called and asked if I'd want to direct theater. Okay. And that's all it took, and I was back in the classroom. But see, it was there that I slowly realized, in front of a captive audience of teenagers, that I could hone my humor craft every hour of every day. I had humor's power, and I could wield it to educate, to entertain, and to control. I promised students in my English class that they would only be required to laugh once during every school year, or they would fail. Just once. Daily, I would give them a journal question because it's important to write every day, and it's important for me to take attendance without you talking. So sometimes the question would be related to what we were studying. Sometimes it would be random, and sometimes it would be inspiration as I drove to work that day. And on this fateful day, it was, as I overheard radio talk show hosts discussing what they would do differently if they were the opposite gender. And I thought, great question. I'll ask the kids. I wrote, if you were the opposite gender for the day, what would you do differently? And the students began writing, except for one young teenage boy who blurted out, dude, if I was a chick, I'd play with myself all day long. And the students laughed. And I had two choices, and quickly. I could remove him from a class and wield that power as a disciplinarian, or I could use humor and wield that power. Guess which one I picked? So I said, no, honey, the question says, what would you do differently? The class erupted in laughter. Thank you. I appreciate your participation. But mostly because he just got burned by the teacher. Yeah. Well, I didn't have any problems with him the rest of the year. And they all learned very quickly that I was funnier and faster to the punchline. I suppose 27 years of educating teenagers is a longer run than any late-night talk show hosts have to claim. And I have students from all over the world who still speak to me and communicate with me and keep in touch. Some who grew up with me and some who became my best friends after they grew up too. This has been one of the greatest privileges and honors of my life, to spend time with young people and hopefully make positive impacts on their lives and let them make positive ones on mine with their stories and my stories and our humor. And I haven't asked them, but I think Dave and Rosie would be proud. Thank you.
Oh, Jennifer. First of all, you would have made the most dynamic talk show host.
Aw.
I would have paid money to see that happen. But what an I want to go to that moment on the train. Like, you are in New York, you made it. You are taking a chance. You went to the Big Apple. And what got you into photography, first of all?
Well, I've always felt like it was an art form that was similar to directing. You know, it was the big picture. It was, and I always, in college, I joined the honors program so I could take extra credit classes and my parents wouldn't have to pay. So one of them was photography, because I was really going to be a journalist. I always wanted to be a writer, that kind of thing. And I had a teacher that said, I think you should direct theater instead, which I was gut wrenched about, but she was pretty much right. But don't tell her, because that's just rude. Anyway, so I had taken some classes, loved my professor, and really enjoyed all of that kind of thing. So I'd taken a few pictures of students, but I'd never built a portfolio. I didn't even know what that was. So it also has a lot to do with film, television, directing on stage, because it's big picture, it's blocking, it's making sure that you have what you want in the frame, and it's basically what my directors in high school always said was, you're just making little pictures on the stage, is what theater is. Making little oh, look at that, that's a pretty picture. Oh, look at that, that's a pretty picture. So it's kind of crafting, although with photography it's just making sure the right things are in the right frame or looked at the right angle. And so I loved that, especially because there's so much in New York City to take pictures of that we didn't have in Central Illinois. So that was really what got me interested in it. And at that time, we're just starting digital photography. I'm still shooting with black and white and a film camera. And so since I hadn't been accepted into the school yet, they would still let me use their equipment. So I spent a lot of time at B&H Photo, and I spent a lot of time in the darkroom learning how to process color film, learning how to process black and white film. And, it's amazing to think now of how much gigabytes an image took on a digital camera that now is like such a small pittance on your smartphone. But just amazing to have the access to go in and develop my own film and decide how I wanted to process those pictures. So I love a double-decker bus. So I got on one of those in August and took pictures of all the stuff downtown, but I hadn't taken anything of the Empire State Building, which is just iconic, and I really wanted to do that. So that's kind of what led me, oh, good, the kids have an early morning field trip. I'm going to go that day, because that way they're not going to be, I've got them off. Tuesdays were the day that the household had a Portuguese maid that came, or housekeeper that came, and I really didn't want to be in her way. So that perfect, I've got it out, I'll go to the city. I will make sure that I'm out of her way, I'm out of my own way, and I'm back in time for when the kids get back from their field trip. And I picked up the wrong black bag. And so when I got on the train, I was just mad. I was just so mad at myself for not being prepared, and now adding all this time, and now I was going to have to go back to the house and interrupt the Portuguese's, how her whole plan of how whatever her procedure was. But then when the second plane hit, and then I'm trying to explain to her, and I knew Spanish, but I don't know how close that was. I'm trying to help her understand. We found a Spanish-speaking channel on the news, and so we could find that, so she understood then kind of what she had broken English, and I could understand most of what, but I didn't know how to explain, because I'll be very honest, I didn't know how to explain it to myself.
Yeah.
And the dad of the kids was in downtown. The mom was in the Czech Republic on business. The kids were on a field trip, which as a parent, I should have known where they were. I had no idea. They were going to look at leaves somewhere on some botanical type of field trip. I had no idea. I'm responsible for their kids. There's a global, or at least it felt global, but our city's on fire, and I don't know where the kids are. And I'm responsible for their kids, and within an hour or so, all of the cell phone towers kind of went down, and then you can't get a hold of anybody. And so I called the school I had been at for 5 years, and I said, I just want to let you know I'm okay. And they're like, oh, great. Good to hear from you. They had no clue. It hadn't really hit there yet. And I thought, I'm going to give them news. I told my mom I'm home. I'll stay here. And so I was, I had a cell phone. We had a house phone. All the previous nannies started calling the house phone so I could check in. And I said, I assume everybody's okay. I don't know. We did hear from Mom. She was being very well protected by other people around who knew she was American and were comforting her in the Czech Republic. Is there anything we can do, And the dad said, I'm trapped in Manhattan because they'd closed all of the tunnels, the bridges, all of the things. And I said, that's okay. He goes, I'm just going to go out in like a little bodega here and get as much food and water as I can for my employees. I said, I'll get the kids. I'll get them home safe. I'm sure they're at school, because they were not close enough to be impacted by that. So, and he actually found a way out of the city. I don't know exactly. I never asked him how that happened, but he ended up picking the kids up. But it wasn't until 6 or 7 o'clock that night.
So Jennifer,
Yeah.
every person we know has their own 9/11 story. Where were you the moment you found out? When you and I were working on your story for That's What She Said, and we were, like, every time you explained to me, like, you just say it like it happened, but I'm really trying to, like, you were on the train.
Yeah.
You were on the train. The destination was the World Trade Center. You realized you didn't have your bag. You stepped off the train and you watched the doors close. Yeah. That moment, like, I get shivers every time I think about that.
Yeah.
And thank you for sharing the day and keeping everyone safe and taking care of the Portuguese housekeeper. But that moment of watching the doors close, like, that's fate, or I don't know what that is.
How old were you?
26. Yeah, I taught for 5 years, so 27. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, and I was thinking, my kids are now in their early 20s and thinking, I can't imagine them going through everything that your family went through. And you were still reeling to go through that kind of a huge trauma on the heels of losing your sister. How did you even put one foot in front of the other after that?
I think that's probably why it's matter of fact, because it felt comforting for me, which I hate. I hated that feeling, but I was like, oh, I'm not the only one anymore that's in this space. Okay. There's a movie, I think Gwyneth Paltrow's in it, called Sliding Doors, that came out a few years before, that I just, every time I saw it, and it's basically about a subway doors that slide closed. And on one version of the movie, she's on one side, on the other, she's on the other, and you see both lives. And it kind of felt like that was my moment of, if I had been on the other side. And when my daughter, who's now 20, so 10 years ago, we visited, we got to go to the 9/11 Museum and Memorial, and you could tell your story. So here I'm in a booth, and she's standing right by me at 10, and I'm telling the story, and I just said, and had I been on the other side of those doors, she may not be here. And I don't know. I can't say that, because so many times in grief, people say, oh, well, God needed you for something else, or that was, God needed that angel, and that, it bothers me because I don't know why things happen, why some are taken and some aren't. And I can't say for those over 2,000 people who didn't make it out that day that was their time or wasn't. But I don't really know. I just know that for me, I'm so grateful for being forgetful or not planning well in that particular moment, and also then trying to find how I can make good out of it. And it's not necessarily that day, but I found I still find things funny on probably inappropriate times and dark humor and that kind of thing. And I just really felt like maybe that was my calling. Maybe that's what I needed to share, was that there's going to be really difficult times.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to have that.
So Jennifer, you have taught me a lot about the power of humor. You have a lot of experience in that field, and I want to explore some of that. But we're going to
Okay.
take a quick break,
Okay.
and then I have some questions for you.
Look out.
So Jennifer, you taught me about an organization that you belong to that believes in humor as a power, as a superpower, as a device. Okay, I'm gonna completely massacre this. So you tell me.
Okay. It is the Association for Applied and Therapeutic Humor.
That's what I said.
Yeah,
that's
exactly what she said.
That's
Same.
what it was.
Yeah. It's an international organization, and so it's housed in Illinois, but we have members all over the world. And essentially, we have the side of our scientists and our researchers and all of that actually study how the brain reacts to humor. Way back from a study that when you put a pencil in your mouth like this, it tricks your brain into thinking you're smiling. And so your endorphins are released and serotonin and all of your stress hormone, the cortisol, is actually reduced.
With a pencil.
Well, you can't do it now because now you know. Yeah, you could trick other people though. And eventually it's just because the shape of your mouth is in a smile. And we think that, and these mirror neurons of when you walk down the hallway or a street and you see somebody and they growl at you, you kind of want to growl back, but if they smile at you, you don't even realize that you smiled back. It's just the mirror neuron of the brain. So the more positive you put out, the more you get back, kind of thing is actually true. And then the other side, which is those who apply humor and then how they use it. So we have nurses, we have doctors. Patch Adams is a former member, who have used humor to connect with people, to help with Alzheimer's. They're saying that in findings that humor is the last thing people lose in their cycle, but it's also one of the first that we ask babies to smile or to laugh, or we play peekaboo with them, and which is kind of a evil game to play with children, to say, here, I'm going to take away your caregiver. Oh, I brought her back. And then they relieve that's what's causing the laughter, is that the release of, oh,
like,
my
where
caregiver.
did they go?
Yeah,
They
okay, they're
panic.
there. Okay, they're there. And it's that release that is actually a lot of humor and laughter, because sometimes, like, if someone is not a really great storyteller or a great joke giver, and they're like, oh, I've got one, and you're like, oh. And then when it's not bad or offensive, you're like, oh, yeah, okay. Or, and there's the whole process of the different stages of humor that we learn about. And the first one is that knock-knock joke after you do the peekaboo, is a knock-knock joke. And it's really, there's a rhythm to humor. And children are discovering that. And they're trying to figure out there's a pattern to joke telling or to getting people to laugh. And when they're young, we laugh at whatever they say. And then eventually we stop, because it's like, no, you have to develop something funny. So then they start working on what can be funny. And, okay, and then it's the orange, you glad I didn't say banana again. And then you get into the next stage, which is kind of riddle-dee-dee. And it's like coming up with like little riddles, or what do you get when you cross an elephant and a rhino? Elephino. And just little, and then that's also a risk, because, I kind of cursed a little bit. And the little kids, they love that kind of stuff, because that's the cursing without the cursing. And then you move on to potty humor, which some people
Is
never-
that like an official category?
It is.
Really?
Yes. And some people, like my husband, never move out of that. They love it. They love it. My children think anything with any kind of potty humor is the most hysterical thing. And when I talk about it, they know it's serious, because I don't usually talk about that type of thing. And they bust over twice as hard when I say something.
Carrie, I'm telling you, she is like your spirit sister.
I love
over
it. Well,
here.
I was raising my hand because I thought you were going to say your husband does
And-
not do. And
Oh, no,
I
no.
am like,
You can
I'm
chat-
a no
chat.
potty humor.
No potty humor.
No,
Okay.
I am a no.
Okay, I'm not either.
It's just not something. But I think that families have dynamics of different kinds of humor. Like in my family, there are rankings. You know, we'll be at the dinner table and people get ranked for their humor for the day. And with the delivery, the content.
Sure.
I'm a chronic over laugher. I start laughing before I deliver the punchline. So I'm usually ranked pretty low.
To give it away.
But I do. I start the setup and then I can't handle it and I start laughing.
Okay, but you're good to have in an audience.
Yes.
Absolutely, in
I
the
have a
front row.
purpose.
That's
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think that humor, like, I just, everything about your piece, because I love the combination of that's life. Things are heavy sometimes things are really hard, but humor is always quick to follow. You know, I think of some of the hardest times, you know, in the funeral home after my dad passed, and my sisters and I had some of our best laughs there.
Yeah.
But it really is a relief sometimes when it's such a stressful moment, and I remember my kids when they were developing their humor, you know, and they knew that I didn't like potty talk, and if somebody threw out like poop, you know, everybody would bust out. They knew I'd be
Oh, sure.
horrified,
Yeah.
and it has such a purpose in all of our lives.
Did you know there was an official organization about the advancement?
No,
of cure?
I'm going to be
You
applying
should
the second
be
we're
a
done.
member. So Jennifer is serving or has served or recently served as the president
Yeah.
of this organization, like worldwide,
Yeah.
fancy. And how was that experience?
Well, it was post COVID. So we had to speak of, you know, another
Tragedy plus
pandemic.
0 time,
No,
yes.
Exactly. So that was the other thing too, is how do you be funny during a not so funny time, and try to use that to bring people together. Well, everyone was at home or working overtime, and that was something that let's find what we have in common. We may not have the same opinion on vaccines or how it's being handled, but we're all hunting for who's in charge. Who's the adult? Because I don't want to be the adult in charge. Like, you know, when you're little, you look for the adult to tell us what to do, and nobody knew what to do. Even your adults didn't know what to do, and it's all brand new for us. And so you're looking for that, but then, so I'm finding little clips or little tweets or little things that I found humorous that also brought us together. Like, oh, you know, we planned for a 2-week pandemic, so I ate all of my snacks in the first 15 minutes. So what do you do now? You know, and everybody else was like, yeah, me too. Yeah, what are we going to do? You know, and so those kinds of things. And I found a way to brand so that when you saw our stuff being shared, then it drew you back to us. And we thought, well, if nothing else, hopefully people know this is the time you need laughter more than ever.
Like, you got to really apply your knowledge. Be like,
Yeah.
we are the professionals. We've got this. We're going to teach you all how to chuckle our way through this.
Yeah, we don't
I mean,
know.
you really had to put it to action.
Well, and we had a lot of Zoom meetings before Zoom meetings were a thing, because we were international. So we would have monthly meetings, and so like, hey, we can teach you how to Zoom. We can teach you how to conference. We can do this, you know, and so we did. We became a teaching source for not just humor, but technology and Zoom and things like that. So we took that to the next level, and it was really about application. When I met this group, I had known from the very early age, my mother said, we won't have a lot of money, but we're going to laugh a lot. Okay, well, I can do that because laughter's free. Okay, we can keep making more. And so growing up in that household, then that's how I knew you had power in humor, and you could find ways to not just entertain, but to control a situation or to diffuse. You know, I even use that with my teenagers now. I would use Weird Al style you know, song parodies to get them up in the morning and moving. Or if you don't get up and moving, I will continue singing. We're up, we're up. You know?
And I'm in education too,
Yeah.
and I think that humor is like my best tool in my back pocket. Someone is sad and they don't want to come in. Someone is being high energy. All the different things. It all can be solved with whatever, you know, I've been doing this for 30 some years. So I always know like they're gonna like this one.
Yeah.
And it's humor. It's
Yeah.
not the heavy-handed of knock it off or any of that.
Or if it-
100% of the time it's humor.
Or if you use that, you don't get the same results. You
Yeah.
know, it's like, let's, you know, catch more flies with honey, as they say. Or and I don't expect everyone's going to have my type of humor. So I know some kids suffered through my classes, and they just didn't have the same type of humor. They didn't get it. They don't, and I know that they did, and I won't apologize for who I am, but I'm sorry that I was the only English teacher. And you had to get 4 years,
Those
Illinois
are some
says.
lucky kids who had you guys as teachers, and you were able to use your gift.
Yeah.
It's a gift that you have, your ability to make people laugh. I want to hear more about other things that you have done, like your book.
Okay.
And I heard there was a TED Talk once upon a time. So we're going to take a quick break and learn a little bit more about the mystery of Jennifer Keith. I am so glad we are wrapping this up on a humorous note and talking about not just the humor that you used in your story, but the humor that you use in life. You use it as a tool. You have it as a gift and a skill. So where else have you applied this gift of yours?
Well, I have had, unfortunately, quite a bit of trauma in my life, as has every other human. So,
A little bit.
yeah. So I kind of developed my own method on mixing the humor and the trauma kind of together. And some things are never going to be funny. But what I did was I developed the GRIT method of healing with humor. So GRIT is grieve, relate, invest, and transform. So we're taking those really, really sad moments in our life, and we are then finding something that was funny at that time. It doesn't have to be that thing was funny, but something, a funeral comment, a story, an awkward situation that happened during a serious time, that we can find humor in, sometimes a lot later, but had something to do at that exact time. So we're transforming all of that. And so that I developed into a book that I wrote called Fixing the Funny Bone. And it goes through the stages of humor that I was talking about and referencing some of the association's ideals and some of their research. And because that is not my forte, is the research. I love to read it. I'm very grateful that they do it, but I'm an applier. And so then I was selected to give a TED Talk, and my TED Talk's title is Anything That Can Go Wrong Can Be Funny, and start off with a similar to my book where my husband proposed, and it was not the beautiful story that I thought it was going to be, that I dreamt of it in my soap opera life.
No, it didn't go perfectly.
But we're still married, and we laugh a lot, and I usually laugh at him. He laughs at me too. So, and I think too that it's important to note that a lot of times when we're looking for a relationship, whether that is a family or a spouse or friends, we pick people that have very similar senses of humor. We like the same types of things, and that's okay if you find people that don't. It's also funny to be around people that have a very different sense of humor than you and be like, I don't know why they think something is funny. But it's also just so rewarding. And so like when you're around people that think you're funny, it's just like, yes, I found my people. They think I'm funny. And please make sure you're in the front of the audience anytime I speak, because that's just such encouragement.
As a matter of fact, I
Oh.
seem to remember there being a little Jennifer Keith fan club.
I
And that's what
did.
she said. Carrie, if you had been, there was a group of ladies wearing shirts that said, "That's what Jennifer said,"
That's what Jen said.
like hanging
Yeah.
out in the audience, front row.
Including that
love
principal who was the one who found me when I moved back from, she was there.
Really?
And then she was like, what's the name of the kid? She wanted to know the kid that I had humiliated. And I said, I love it.
Ooh.
And including several of I had 2 students in that group that I had as their parent, as their teacher, as their parent, as their teacher, and who are now some of my best friends. And that's odd, because I had somebody come up to me at a meeting last week and said, can I call you by Jennifer? And I said, yeah. She's like, well, it's just weird because you've always been Mrs. Keith to me.
What is the proper time frame? Ooh, I'm going to do that again. What is the proper amount of time, my educator friends,
Yeah.
for a student once you are no longer their teacher, that they can no longer refer to you as Mrs. So-and-so? Or is there one?
I think once you start teaching their children,
Oh, okay.
like, I don't know.
Like it's a generation.
Yeah,
right? Okay.
I
Well,
still
I don't
call
know.
my teachers
I
Mrs.
know,
Jordan,
me
Mrs.
too.
Yeah,
And I went back to my home high school to teach. So I had people who taught me that were now my colleagues. And for a while, I couldn't call them by their first names either. I don't know. I feel like I've been called everything negative, probably in somebody's head. So I'm like, if you want to call me my first name, that's at least positive.
But what
'Cause
I
it's right.
imagine, I just imagine such a great relationship with your students, current and informal. There was a coach my kids had, and he said, "I don't coach for the wins and losses. I coach for the wedding invitation."
That's
Oh
sweet.
my!
And I think, oh, that's
goodness.
going to be you. You're going to be getting those wedding invitations.
I do. I
and-
love that. I love that. And I love that they're still like when they friend me on Facebook or something, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad you still want to know who I am and hang out. And, you know, my first group of kids, I have my lawyer is among them because I hired him as when I needed an attorney. And so he's my lawyer. And he's the same kid that sang at my sister's funeral as a senior in high school is my attorney. You know, and so I'm just so blessed to have so many wonderful people in my life.
Ladies, we could do this all day.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we don't have that amount of time, but your students are so lucky to have you. Your students are so lucky to have you. The ladies who go through That's What She Said are so lucky to have me.
That's right. True
But we all have our
story.
gifts. We all have our talents. And thank you for bringing humor into our lives and sharing all of its awesome power. And thank you for sharing your story on the She Said stage and for spending time with us today. Jennifer Keith, it's lovely to see you. Appreciate all that you are and all that you bring to this world. Carrie, as always, pleasure. And friends, thank you for joining us today on the She Said Project podcast.
Over and out.
Thank you for listening to the She Said Project podcast. All materials contained in the podcast are the exclusive property of the She Said Project and That's What She Said LLC. For more information on our live shows, go to shesaidproject.com.